Hello and welcome to Piano Shack with me, Woody. Thank you for tuning in. So if you are looking for a quick guide tutorial for the Jupiter XM, then you've come to the right place. Today I'll guide you through selecting scenes. We'll talk about the architecture, choosing parts and tones, how to use some of the front panel controls, how this mysterious intelligent arpeggiator works, and some of the other real-time controls on this wonderful little synthesizer. So let's get on with it. So perhaps you've just bought one of these, or you've eyed one up in the music store and want to try it out. Well, this is the quickest way to get up and running. Let's go to the scene mode. Make sure that's enabled. You'll press the button there, scene, and then we can select 16 different sounds here. 16 different scenes, and a scene is a combination of all of the different parts. This synthesizer plays 4 parts and the rhythm part at the same time, plus the arpeggio settings, plus all of the real-time control settings. So let's just play a few together right now. So that's the quickest way to get some instant gratification and a lot of fun. The scene button and then choose one of the 16 sounds here, but there are a lot more scenes on board. Just press the enter button and then we can use this knob here to scroll through one at a time through a whole lot more banks of scenes, or this knob will jump up 10 steps at a time. So that's a way to explore even more sounds. Now there are some real-time controls that you might want to experiment with at the same time. Let's find a suitable patch and I'll demonstrate. This one, for example, we can experiment. The cutoff usually has the biggest effect. You can experiment with turning on and off the arpeggio. With it on. There are 2 assignable sliders here as well that usually have a very significant effect to the sound depending on how they're programmed. So let's try that right now. We'll get this thing going again. Here are your octave up and down buttons. Let's see what these do. Not a great deal in this particular case. The pitch mod, or the pitch bend wheel, is down here, and the modulation wheel. In this case it's doing a combination of the filter and some modulation. Let's switch through a couple more. Here we find a patch where these are having some effect. It all depends how it's programmed. Okay, let's dive into, why don't we dive into the architecture of the synthesizer? The first thing we should do is to initialize the scene. There are a couple of ways to do this. The easiest way probably is whilst we're in this scene, press the enter button, the scene selection page, just scroll down to the bottom and you'll find a couple of init sounds. You can also go in through the menu and achieve the same thing, but I find this to be quicker. So we've selected now an init sound. It sounds like this, not particularly init, but this is actually the best we'll get. And now let's get out of the scene mode and go into the part mode to really explore the architecture. Let's talk about selecting parts. From our init scene then, let's press the part button here. And now we have some flashing lights here. It might not be so apparent on the camera, but there are a group of 5 buttons here. One is lit, the other 4 are flashing, and then there is a group here of another 5 buttons, only one of which is lit right now. So the architecture of this synthesizer is there are 4 synthesizer or tone parts, and there is 1 rhythm part. And these group of 5 buttons is used to select which of the parts you're going to be currently editing using the front panel and the menus here on the screen. So that's how we select through these 5 here. Now a part, you can think of it as one particular track. You can have one tone. Roland calls patches or sounds tones these days. So we'll have one tone on parts 1, 2, 3, 4, and rhythm 5 always has to be a rhythm tone. It says R there, so that's not flexible. But these 4, we can assign any types of tone to that. And then we have the concept of these model banks. I can't stop myself saying modal banks, but it is model banks. And that's where we choose to load what type of synthesizer model is to be played on each part. And we can choose between, actually we'll get to this a little bit later perhaps. We'll explore this in much more detail later on, but we have a choice of the Jupiter, the Juno, the JX, the XV5080, SH101, and an RD. I think it's a supernatural piano model. But we'll get onto that later when we talk about choosing sounds. But this is where you first select the part which you want to load a sound or make any edits. Now the next part of sounds, or the next patch of buttons here, the next collection of buttons selects which parts are currently on and off, and you can toggle between them here. So if we switch everything off, we hear nothing. We'd have a switch on part 1. We hear that. If I switch that off again, switch on part 2, part 3, part 4, monophonic, and part 5 is our rhythms. We pitch down. Okay. We can, of course, do a very quick layer now. If I was to switch all of these on, we can build up quite a nice layer. Let's try that. Switch on part 3. The monophonic part. And you wouldn't normally switch on the rhythms at the same time. You wouldn't want to play those from the keyboard. So that's how you select parts and switch them on and off. So I'm now going to switch everything off so we can just focus on part 1. So we'll select that now for editing. So that's constantly lit. The other 4 parts are flashing. Now let's talk about choosing a sound for this part. The way you do that is to leave the part mode. We're going to press this model bank key. Now the first step is to choose what kind of synthesizer model we want to load. Now this thing is full with the, is it 5 classic Roland legacy synthesizers from the 80s and 90s, and maybe even the 70s. So let's choose one of those now, and we do it using the same set of keys. It can be a bit confusing at times. You have to remember which mode you're in because these keys can have different effects depending on the mode. So let's choose the right model bank then for part 1. By default, it's going to be on the Jupiter. We can switch to Juno. We can switch to the JX8P. We can switch to SH101, which is monophonic. This one is our XV5080. And this is the RD piano. And you are free to assign whichever model bank you want to each part. Let's go for the Jupiter, why not, this time. And now we're going to want to choose a sound. So the way you do that is just like choosing a scene. We're going to use this knob here to scroll through them. If we press the enter button, we'll get a list that we can see what's coming up. That's a nice spacey pad. So let's go back to the part mode and let's layer something up with this on track 2 or part 2. So we'll select 2 for editing. We'll also switch on part 2. Now we've got a layer right away. But I'm going to go back to the modal bank and let's choose a JX8P for the second sound. Scrolling through the sounds of the JX8P, the presets. That's good. And then of course, if we go back to the part mode, we can continue to fill up parts 3 and 4 with 2 more synth tones. But I think by now you get the general idea how this works. Okay, let's choose a sound for part 3 and we'll explore the category browser. This is another nice way to find your sounds. So I've selected part 3 for editing and we have chosen part 3 to play in isolation. So I've turned off this big layer so we can just listen to number 3. If we go back to the modal bank, now we can actually shortcut to some categories by pressing these buttons here. This is the poly key category. This is the synth pad category. Let's take a listen to poly key, for example. You know now we can just turn this one or go up in steps of 10 with this knob here. And now it's going to pick sounds from all of the various model banks that are in this particular sound category. We can also go up to the category here and then browse it using the knob here. And then once we've found the category that we want to explore, we can come back down here and then scroll through the sounds in that category. We're in the beat groove category right now, which is kind of interesting. Let's choose a different category. This is synth brass. Jump back down here and we can start choosing the sounds. So this is a good time to explain how some of the most important front panel controls work. We won't go into a huge amount of depth here, but I'll just show you the basic controls that are most important to use when you're getting started. So of course the cutoff, let's have a listen to that. If you want to balance the sounds in a layer, we've got a very convenient level here. We can adjust the envelope. Oh, let's take a listen to the resonance first. We can adjust the filter envelope down here. To get a nice sweep effect here. We can adjust the amp envelope as well. I was adjusting both at the same time there by pressing both of the notes, or both of these lights at the same time. We can adjust the pitch envelope, the filter envelope, and the amp envelope if we want. It is worth noting that the parameters that are mapped to the front panel do differ a little bit depending on what synth model bank you've chosen. Sometimes some of these knobs don't have any effect, and other parameters for that particular synth might not even be available on the front panel, something to keep in mind. We've also got some effects buttons here on the right. Let's make this a bit snappy again. We can add some reverb. Let's try the chorus. Some delay. Too much of a good thing. We also have controls for the oscillator and the LFO here, but that's probably a bit too much information for a quick start guide. So let's move on and talk about splits. For part one, I've selected some nice strings. Adjust the cutoff to taste. For part two, I've selected a very nice fat bass. Again. Just cut off to taste. Right, if we put these on at the same time, we get a layer. Which is not really what I want. I want a split. Very simple to do. We'll just activate the function button, press the split. And now what we have on part one will be on the right side of the split, part two on the left. So we get something like this. Okay, I've chosen the init scene, so let's get to grips with this rather mysterious arpeggio that I haven't really figured out yet myself. But I can show you the basics anyway. So what we're going to do is enable it. I find the hold to be quite a nice feature as well, which will just latch it so it keeps playing even if I remove my hands from the keys. So firstly, we can choose which type we want. I have to actually trigger it again after choosing the type. It's worth noting the tempo is also changed when you change the type of arpeggio. The tempo is programmed as part of the arpeggio. You'll also get some sounds that you haven't even dialed up, that are outside of what you've chosen here, that Roland have decided are suitable for the type of arpeggio. See if we can find some examples. We can also enable a rhythm arpeggio as well. You can hear, by the way, this was a... Switch it on. A multi-track arpeggio. We have different parts there playing different arpeggios at the same time. Fiddle around with the rhythm settings and we'll put some drum patterns into the mix as well. Just turn the knob. Now, the way this rhythm section works is that it changes the patterns depending on how frantically you're playing on the keyboard, which is how you control what drums are playing, or lack of control perhaps in some cases. But let me show you how that works then. So I'm going to switch it on. We have play detection enabled for the keys, which means it's going to change the chords depending on the harmonies, depending on what I'm playing on the keyboard. The beat detection means it will play different patterns depending on what I'm doing on the keyboard as well. So I'll see if I can trigger some more laid back patterns and then play something frantically, see if some more intricate patterns will kick in. Let's see what happens. It can even kick in halfway through a measure. And And this is the way you have to choose your drum pattern unless you start diving into the menus, just by playing with different intensities. But then when you find something you like, you can just switch off the play detection for the beats. Let's try that. So maybe you were able to hear then, before I killed it, how we were able to select and keep that busy beat going. Let's try it again. Okay, so that is hopefully a nice introduction on how to get started with the Jupiter XM and all the controls and the features on board. I hope you found it useful and enjoyable. Coming up then, I have a video where I'll share my honest opinions and first impressions about this very interesting and curious little synthesizer. So please consider subscribing if you don't want to miss that. And thank you to everybody who has subscribed to this channel. It means a huge amount to me, so thank you very much. I do appreciate and look forward to reading all your comments as well. So that's it for today. Thanks for watching. I'll see you again next time. Cheerio.